Do you find these particular orchids, the dendrobiums, particularly difficult to look after? You're able to grow those Phalaenopsis really well, but these ones specifically, you find just tend to want to die on you. Don't worry, I've had the same problem many times, but I've found out how to look after them and care for them to ensure that I get them to thrive and flower for me. Let's just get straight into the repot of this, and as I'm repotting it, I'll show you how to do it and when to do it, why we're doing it at this point, and also how to care for these plants to ensure that we can keep them thriving. So most of these shop-bought dendrobiums are Dendrobium bigibbum or Dendrobium Phalaenopsis hybrids. They're interspecific hybrids, so they've got quite a complex mix of plants in them. But those that have a lot, this one, for instance, is Dendrobium burana white, which is about 91% Dendrobium bigibbum. So that means they're going to be slightly more difficult to take care of than some of those other Denphals, Dendrobium Phalaenopsis hybrids, that have less of a percentage of the bigibbum in them, because often they hybridize with many different dendrobiums to form these beautiful flowers. Also, you may notice with a lot of these dendrobiums is they come in relatively small pots for the size plants they are. This is actually by design. People prefer to plant them up into slightly smaller pots than what you may otherwise plant your orchids up into. This is, for one, because their roots, look at their root volume here. This is all dried up and dead now. So, but their roots like lots of air movement. They don't want to be moist or wet all the time. They like a little bit of moisture, but not to be soggy and wet and damp. So the smaller pot allows for better air movement right through the pot, along with the fast drainage and, of course, a speedier drying out period. So if you've got a much bigger pot, you're going to have much less air movement into the center of the pot, and also it's going to take a lot longer for that middle of that pot to dry out. When these dendrobiums are a little bit root bound, not a lot, just a little bit, they tend to flower better. It almost signals to the plant that it's not time to produce more roots, but rather time to produce flowers. Okay, now let's have a look here. So this was just a smaller pot put into a bigger pot, and let's have a removal out of this to see what this was potted in to start with. Oops. We see it's actually quite a fine media. Of majority of it is these styrofoam or polystyrene balls, and a bit of bark that's now starting to decompose, and we can see how all the roots have rotted. So by placing the pot into another pot and having such a fine media, it stopped the air movement, which has actually rotted all the roots. So we can see the little kikis that it was producing instead of flower spikes. This is from the media probably holding a bit too much moisture at the wrong times of year. I'm repotting this, although these flowers haven't quite finished, but they didn't flower particularly well for us. We only got a couple of flowers on them, and the other flower spike aborted its flowers. Dendrobium bigibbums, or the ones that have a lot of bigibbum in them, like to be repotted immediately after flowering or at the very beginning of spring. Just as winter's ending would be time to repot it. So here I'm doing it now just as these are finishing off because of our climate. We get pretty cold in winter here, which is what they don't like. Especially if it's got a lot of the bigibbum in it, they don't like to go below around 15 or 17 degrees Celsius. So we have to keep them warm in winter, and that's not always an easy thing. So this year I'm going to be keeping this indoors and changing up the media. I'll just get rid of those little kikis that have been growing. We can see there's still really nice new root growth on those kikis. So the plant is still in active growth. We can even see some roots now being produced there at the base of the plant, which is what we like to see, especially when we're repotting. We like to see active root growth to know that the plant is going to settle in quickly. Also, one of the major hindrances to these dendrobiums from flowering is lack of light, and especially during that winter period. So these particularly like to get higher light conditions in winter than they do in summer. So when your temperatures start getting lower, if you're not getting enough daylight hours, then you're going to have to start adding artificial light to them and move them into a brighter spot, even into direct sun at those points, so that it can actually absorb enough of that energy from the sun to help with its flowering. And as these finished flowering, as the temperatures start cooling, remember, don't let them go below 15 or 17 degrees Celsius. Try and keep them in warmer temperatures. They're going to slow down their growth. They go almost dormant, but still, even at this point, you don't want to keep them dry. You don't want them to dry out completely. You want to at least mist them and give them a little bit of moisture every now and again to ensure that their roots don't dry out completely, because as their pseudobulbs start to wrinkle, these hard canes, they take a very long time to recover. And sometimes they may not recover their full turgidity again, and you're just waiting for that new growth to come. You're going to get less new growth because there's less energy in that pseudobulb to produce strong growth again. So you want to try and avoid that sort of stress on your plant. Dehydration stress is one of the worst things for Dendrobium bigibbums. It's well rooted around this rock, so I'm going to leave this on. It's going to help stabilize the plant when I place it, because there's not much root volume left to actually keep it upright. I'm going to have to stake this well, because these dendrobiums are very top heavy. Their center of gravity is quite high, so you're going to have to put them in heavy pots. But when you see the mix I'm going to be using, you'll start understanding one of the reasons that we use such a heavy mix. Also, these dendrobiums like a lot of humidity. And when I say a lot of humidity, I mean a lot. They prefer their humidity levels to stay between 70 and 75% almost throughout the year. Even during those winter cool months, you need to keep your humidity levels up to avoid that desiccation. And only for a short period at the end of winter and heading into spring can you then allow your humidity levels to drop a little bit between sort of 65 and 70. It just helps remind the plant that it's time to actually start flowering. It gives it that little bit of a stress situation, and that will help force those flower buds, because we all know these dendrobiums can flower throughout the year, especially if they're in the right conditions. They'll flower right from the beginning of spring right through till basically the end of autumn. And these flowers themselves last a long time. Each flower can last a month or two even sometimes. And some people, if they're repotting these in late winter or spring, they will actually remove almost all the root volume completely, just leaving those new root shoots, those little root nubs, to then take over from the rooting. But yeah, we've still got some viable roots that I'm going to leave available on the plant, because we're going to be setting this, and then it's going to have to survive through winter. Although we still have another month or so before it will stop its actual growth, and it will still be able to produce enough new roots. We just want to make sure we don't remove all of them. Okay, so this is the pot it was in. That was inside this pot. So all I'm going to be doing is potting it up to the next size, which is this one here. It can go back into the same size pot it originated from, but this one's not looking so well. So we'll just pop it back into this pot here. Now that we've washed the pot out, we'll just take some of that isopropyl alcohol, give the whole pot a good spray to ensure that we're not spreading any of those fungal spores across. And the media I'm using is not going to be particularly suitable for mycorrhizal fungi either, because I'm using broken bricks, charcoal, and a little bit of lacquer. So this is, for one, going to provide me with the weight that I need for the top heaviness of the plant itself. That way it's not going to blow over in the wind or just get too heavy and fall over. Also, it's going to allow for that fast drainage. The water is just going to drain straight out. The clay in the bricks is going to absorb some of that water, but not hold huge amounts. So it will then release that as humidity and moisture for the plant over several hours or even the day. The charcoal is going to help clean the water and remove any toxins in that. Charcoal also does maintain a little bit of moisture in it as well. And then the lacquer is just going to help provide air gaps, keep the spaces in between the odd shapes. If you're going to be growing these outdoors, you may not want to use things like broken brick and lacquer, as what may happen is you're going to get evaporative cooling. If your temperatures outside get cooler, you may want to use perhaps just plain charcoal and a heavy clay pot, or have heavy stones at the bottom of your pot and then use the charcoal inside your pot. There's different ways to provide the weight into the pot, but if you're growing outdoors in cooler climates and you like your bigibbums, then perhaps something like just the charcoal is going to work fine. You're going to get less of that evaporative cooling. They don't produce as cold an environment inside the pot as what your lacquer and your clay bricks will cause. So we'll just put some of the bigger pieces down the bottom of the pot. This is the furthest away from where the roots are going to initially be, so it needs to ensure that the air movement can come up really easily. And then we'll just mix them together. No particular measurements really needed. You just want to make sure you get a nice mix with even air gaps through it. And there we go. All these nice air gaps through the pot are going to help the air get in right the way through to the center of the pot and to those roots, so they're going to be less likely to rot. It's going to allow for that fast drainage and the stability of the plant itself. And then at this point as well, our kikis have got enough root volume, so we can just gently remove them without causing too much damage to the plant, and then pot those up separately. Often with these Dendrobium bigibbums, a lot of people will plant them towards one side of the pot and allow them to grow to the other edge. I often just pop them straight into the center of the pot, because I do find that I get growth all the way around my plant when I do that. So it doesn't often generally just grow off in one direction like you may get with a cattleya. I often get those little dormant lateral buds around all edges of the plant that then pop up, and it actually gives me a bigger plant faster than what some of the other people get when they've pushed those buds directly up against the side of a pot. And then the plant does actually only want to grow out in one direction. Of course, don't forget to put your label back in. And remember, give them high intensity sun in winter, even higher than what you were getting them in that spring and summertime. If they were getting sort of semi-shaded area during spring and summer, give them full sun in winter. For one, your sun intensity is going to be right down and you'll get fewer daylight hours, but these really want as much sun as possible. In their natural habitat, for one, they don't get much difference in their summer and winter daylight hours. They don't get much difference in their summer and winter temperatures either. So in the summer, it's generally around 29, 30 during the day, and around 23, 25 in the evening, and they generally have about a 7 or 8 degree temperature change during the day-night. In winter, they have about that same sort of percentage drop in temperatures during the daytimes and evenings. So your winter temperatures during the day are around 23 to 25 degrees Celsius, and their nighttime temperatures are about 17 to 19 degrees Celsius. So again, that about 7 degree Celsius change in temperatures. So as much as possible, we want to try and emulate that to get ours to grow as well as they do out in the wild. And remember that short rest period in winter where you can reduce your feeding or stop feeding altogether, but don't stop watering. Ensure that you're giving enough moisture that your canes don't start desiccating. And keep your humidity levels up, which will again help with the reduction of those canes losing too much water. We want these pseudobulbs to be as strong and as plump as possible for the new growth. And even those old canes still produce those flower spikes. So if we can keep them healthy and alive as long as possible, will give us a bigger flower show. So if you are having problems with your dendrobiums blooming, try find out the name, and then to see how much Dendrobium bigibbum is in it. And then now with this video, you'll know how to rectify the problems. Also remember, Dendrobium bigibbum and Dendrobium Phalaenopsis are just synonyms for the same plant. And if you're still struggling to understand your dendrobiums, don't worry, Ed posts a lot of orchid related content down in that Buy Me a Coffee link there all the time. That's available to everyone. Sign up, become a member, and grow like a pro. We also have several other dendrobium related videos that we'll link down in the description box down below. Thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.